ESPN.com. He was at the Brian Colangelo press conference. We'll get some takes from him in just a second. Pete Thompson.
Mike, this hour of the Sports Bash brought to you by the Bellevue Tavern on Route 9 South in beautiful Cape May Courthouse. Start your weekend off right with some great times and great people at the Bellevue Tavern. The Bellevue Tavern, your neighborhood tavern at the shore. Check them out at BellevueTavern.com. Tell Dennis Roberts that Mike and Pete sent you.
That'd be beneficial.
Might get you a beer.
Michael Caskey-Blomain, 97.3 ESPN.com. We'll have reaction from Brian Colangelo's press conference today. Michael, where really he buried the leads almost. He started with Ben Simmons kind of telling everybody what we kind of already thought. He'd be out for the year. Then he went to, the Joel Embiid stuff, which was admirable. He got into Ersan Ilyasova, which was nice. And then he hit on Nerlens Noel. So we'll go back to front here and start with Nerlens Noel. Did he clear up anything on the Nerlens Noel front for you that was maybe a loose end?
I think he did to an extent. I think he really vocalized the kind of the thought process behind the team's decision to trade Nerlens rather than to move forward with him. It was, I think what a lot of us had expected. Brian kind of said it basically came down to the fact that he didn't think, as building the team, that it was necessarily wise to allocate, the amount of money that Noel will be commanding this summer into basically what amounts to a backup role, which is, something that you and I had kind of talked about. It basically, from what it sounded like today, the decision really basically came down to that the team, just didn't really want to commit that sort of money to him. In the long term, and they didn't think that going through the process of restricted free agency would really be worth it to try to have that hold on the salary cap. So at that point, they, decided to make a move and get what they could.
So, the fact that that's their mindset, and he was pretty frank about, look, the player expressed an interest in being paid a lot of money. We respect that, but we didn't see eye to eye with that at this time. That's why we did this. There's a lot of angles you could go here. Should they have tried to match and then do a sign and trade, have them under your control, and then have other teams, as they get more desperate down the road? Now that the landscape is kind of painted here, do you still think they made the right decision and got the right deal?
It's tough to say. I mean, like I said yesterday, if it was me personally, I probably would have done, what you just kind of referred to as far as keeping him on and, re-upping him in restricted free agency this summer and then kind of using that contract as leverage if you want to move him. With that said, Brian kind of made it really clear that the team just didn't want that. It's a process, of course, of restricted free agency of, receiving the offers, matching them, and then having that cap hold on your books basically until the trade is made. He really made it seem like this morning like the team just kind of wanted to avoid that process and avoid that money being spent. And so he decided to move at that point. I think the larger question is, why they didn't necessarily think that Noel was a fit long term as a backup. But you also have to consider it from his perspective, which is something that Brian kind of alluded to, and you did as well. Noel, of course, as a young player, he wants money and he wants the opportunity to play and have a starting role. And, that's what he'll get in Dallas. So it kind of works out in the end for Nerlens. But, I think a lot of the fans here just feel like we got a little bit, less than we possibly could have for a talent like Nerlens.
Michael Caskey-Blomain with us. He was at the press conference today with Brian Colangelo to hear his thoughts, and an interesting press conference it was, Michael, for sure. The emergence of Embiid, did that factor in the Noel deal as far as Brian Colangelo had to say?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, Pete, he pointed to that as, pretty much the main pushing point there with the Nerlens deal. He said, basically that the emergence of Joel from a question mark that he's been the past couple years to, now a feasible, like a product you can see on court that's, so talented. He said having that in place made making a deal for a player like Nerlens Noel that much easier. When you have a guy, Brian said, a couple times that obviously Joel is, the future of this franchise. He's going to be due, a lot of money down the road as well, assuming hopefully that he stays healthy. So, he really emphasized that the team is building around Joel, and the fact that he kind of emerged this season as a dominant force made everyone else on the roster that shares the same position kind of an afterthought and, basically expendable.
Michael Kasky-Blomane at The Real Mike KB on Twitter. If you were a real estate agent, would you want Jahlil Okafor to be your client in Philadelphia?
Nah, definitely not. I don't think, he probably got to breathe a sigh of relief yesterday, for the time being. Obviously, with not being moved, he'll be here in Philly for the rest of the season. But Brian, certainly didn't hide the fact that it did not sound like that the team is still sold on Okafor as a long-term option. He kind of said how Jahlil is facing the same situation as Nerlens, that he wants himself, of course, to be, have the minutes and the starting spot and the opportunity and, of course, a paycheck down the road when the time comes for him. So it certainly made it seem that he also acknowledged the fact that several teams were interested in the team's assets, and that conversations would be picked up again when the trade talks open in the offseason, which is, another sign, I think, that though they didn't come to a deal that they liked at this point, there's still going to be interest in, Okafor in the offseason and around draft night. And, I think talks will be revisited then. And, like he said, it's basically the same situation. When you have Embiid in place, paying another center long-term just doesn't necessarily, at least in Brian's eyes from what he said today, it doesn't necessarily seem logical from a team-building standpoint. So, it definitely seems like Ja, though he's here for the time being, it doesn't sound like he'll be buying, any sort of penthouse in Philly for the long term.
All right, so I'm going to go to Embiid now because this one's interesting. 4 games, it was 2. He said, I regret. We shouldn't have said day-to-day. We should have said he should have said indefinitely, right? So do we have to take him at his word now about 4 games because he completely – first off, I thought he did a poor job today. You can give your opinion on that as well. I thought he looked very uncomfortable, did not answer questions. I mean, he was circling around a lot of things. But do we have to take him at his word on Embiid that he's not done for the year based on how poor they would look after basically now Simmons out for the year and then saying – we want him to play. To have to say again another player's out for the year. So does that tell you that legitimately Embiid has a shot to play?
I think he has a shot. I don't think we can take Colangelo at his word for it at this point with the 4-game thing. I don't think he deserves the benefit of the doubt. He acknowledged, like you said, he did acknowledge that the team handled the last, the recent Embiid injury poorly as far as relating the information to the fans and media. They could have went about that better. Hopefully he'll learn from that. But as of right now, I don't think that the organization deserves the benefit of the doubt as far as, what they say regarding timetables and returns. Personally, I don't see why they would honestly bring Joel back for the point of this season. I mean, at this point in the season, the best case scenario for this team is to lose and to max out their lottery odds and to go forward from there. It certainly wouldn't be a popular choice among the fans, and especially the fans that have, tickets and have purchased tickets for the rest of the games. But there's really no, other than continuing to get Joel experience and get his body out, there's really no benefit to him being out there this season. So while, the 4 games is what's out there right now, and then they're going to reevaluate, I don't think that will be the end. I would not be shocked if he was done for the year. But, that's just something we'll have to wait and see at this point.
Michael, when Colangelo comes out and says there's never, ever been any effort to deceive the fans or mislead the fans or mislead you guys, talking about the media, and then follows up and says there's no deceit, there's no movement toward doing anything dishonest here, A, how credible do you find those statements? And B, how much damage do you think Brian Colangelo has done with the fan base the way he's acted over the last month?
That's a great question, Pete. And honestly, I do think he's done a fairly decent amount of damage. Not to overreact too far, but I think a lot of fans are very fed up. I ran a poll on my Twitter account yesterday asking, the level of faith that the fans had in Colangelo at this point to be the guy to take this team forward. And, to say the least, the results were overwhelmingly negative, and that the fans did not trust him to be the guy. I think he has certainly done some things that, don't rub right with the fan base. And to touch on what Mike said, I kind of agree today. I really don't think he helped his cause very much, though he did, address the issues. I felt like he looked uncomfortable up there, in front of us as far as the media members. And it seemed like he was kind of dodging a little bit of issues. Definitely seemed on edge a bit, which is something that, for all the bad talk that Sam Hinkie received, he always seemed very comfortable and very articulate and able to answer the questions right to the point. Colangelo seemed as though he was not necessarily hiding something, but kind of just like dancing around a lot of the answers rather than just giving, straightforward facts to solid questions. So, to answer your question, Pete, I would say that the perception of him in Philadelphia right now, it's not great. And I don't think that that the team lied to the fan base in reference to him saying they never deceived, but they acknowledge that the information could certainly have been, delivered in a better manner. And you can't help to think that was, somewhat intentional to keep the ticket sales rolling in the meantime.
I don't know if the right way to phrase this is he in over his head, but is he now coming to realize that this isn't Toronto, this isn't Phoenix, this is a town that will capture every soundbite, every post, every comment that's made, and repeat that back to you?
Yes, I do think he's probably learning that. I think he's also learning the hard way some of the real support that the city had for what was building before he got here. I think he looked at, he kind of inherited this situation through his father and looked at it as an opportunity to maybe, help himself and develop this team into a championship team. But I don't think that he necessarily took into account how much scrutiny he would be under, considering how great of a state that the team was kind of in potentially to move forward when he got here. So I think, it's definitely, and it was more obvious to me today than it had been at any other point that he was, like I said, he just seemed a little bit uncomfortable in front of all of us today answering those questions. So I think, like you said, Pete, I don't think it would necessarily be over his head. I mean, it's a guy that does have experience and has done well, but it might be a little bit bigger of a stage and, an undertaking than he had maybe initially thought, and he's starting to learn that now.
Michael Kasky-Blomain, the real Mike KB on Twitter. The Sixers, obviously, I find the Sixers, I don't know about you, Michael, I know this team has been one of the more polarizing discussions in all of sports. This might be one of the most two sides of the fence sports stories in all the four majors. I mean, you could sit down in any city, in any place, and have this conversation, and you're going to have people on both sides here. And I think Colangelo is finding that out right now. But I find it interesting, as you mentioned your Twitter poll, how much faith do you have in Brian Colangelo? Over 700 votes, and 63% of them said bring Sam back, and only 2% out of over 770 votes said they have full faith in Brian Colangelo. I mean, just by somebody's ass dialing or by accident voting, you'd get more than 2%, right? I mean, that seems unbelievable how little faith people have in the quote-unquote basketball guy that was brought in here to clean this up.
Yeah, exactly. I thought that was very telling. The results were along the lines of what I expected, but I did expect it to be a little bit more down the middle. Like you said, I mean, 2% is, it could be anything in a poll with that many votes. So it's very telling of, kind of the attitude in Philadelphia right now toward Brian and what he's done. It's obviously not too late to turn perception around. He still has a lot of pieces to work with, but it's definitely, especially coming off the heels of a guy who was viewed in a very different way in Sam Hinkie. I think to have this sort of a negative perception of Brian, it's definitely a little bit surprising at this point, because he hasn't even been in the city a year yet, which is kind of crazy too.
And by the way, I have a similar poll. 23% I miss Hinkie, 51% bring back Hinkie. So that's about 80% who are somewhat, or 75% that still would rather have Sam be running things. It's unbelievable. That's the story. Michael Kasky-Blomain, the real Mike KB on Twitter. Sixers tonight at home against the Wizards, and you can hear that game on 97.3 ESPN. Thank you, Michael. Enjoy the game tonight.
Thanks, Mike. You too.
Take care. Michael